Okay, now we're going to use the values that we found on the two special triangles to complete the coordinates of every point on this unit circle. And this is what you want to be good at knowing. Okay, so first of all, I'll look at quadrant 1, and this point at 0 degrees is 1, 0. Okay, and of course 90 degrees is 0, 1. Okay, so that means that the cosine of 0 degrees is 1 and the sine is 0. And the cosine of 90 degrees is 0 and the sine is 1. All right. So if you recall on the special triangle, the 45 degrees, radical 2 over 2 is the x, and radical 2 over 2 is the y. That's the one where they're exactly the same, halfway in the middle. Okay. Now, on the 30-degree triangle, across from the small angle is the smaller number. What I try to remember is, I'm just going to draw this right triangle right here. If you can remember this triangle, see how long the x-axis, x coordinate is, and how this right here goes exactly halfway up to 1. So the y coordinate is 1/2, and the x coordinate is the radical 3 over 2. And it's the opposite for, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. And it's the opposite for this triangle right here. If you bring that down, so this is the short x and the long y. So the short x goes exactly halfway to 1, so that's my 1/2. And then the long y is the square root of 3 over 2. Okay, you want to memorize those. And if you memorize quadrant 1, you have the whole unit circle, because what we do is we use reference angles to get the whole circle. All right, so I'm going to share something different. We'll talk about reference angles. All right, so an angle's reference angle is the size of the smallest angle to the horizontal axis. What does that mean? Well, that means if we're talking about this angle in quadrant 1, the reference angle is, the smallest angle is right here to the x-axis, okay? If you're in quadrant 2, now look at this angle here. Actually, I'll get rid of that. We start at 0 and we go out here to quadrant 2. By the way, this is quadrant 1, this is quadrant 2, quadrant 3, and quadrant 4. If we go all the way out here, now this is the angle I'm talking about, all that space. The reference angle is just the smallest angle right here. So how far is it up from the x-axis? And if I go all the way to quadrant 3, the reference angle is going to be how far it is up to the x-axis. And all the way to quadrant 4, say my angle is all this. This is my angle right here. Then the reference angle is how much more I have to go to get up to, that's the reference angle. So these angles, the quadrant 1, quadrant 2, those are all the same measure. And that's why they're reference angles. They're all less than 90 degrees or less than pi over 2 radians. So let's see how this helps us. We're going to draw the reference angles for our angle is 45 degrees. So let's, again, always get my quadrant angles. Here's my 0. So 45 is going to be straight up here. Okay, this is my 45-degree angle. Now, the other angles are going to be, if I go this way, and this way, and this way, the other angles also have a reference angle of 45 degrees. So all of these are 45, but what are the angles? So, okay, quadrant 1 is this angle. Any angle in quadrant 1 is its own reference angle. But the question is, what angle is this one right here in quadrant 2? Well, it's 135 degrees because it's 45 degrees away from 180. And which angle is down here in quadrant 3? Well, this is 180. So we're going to add 45. So that's my 225. And then this is my angle, 225 degrees, so 135 degrees. And then over here is going to be 45 degrees from 360, so that's going to be 315 degrees. So the angles that have a reference angle of 45 degrees are 135 degrees. Well, you do count yourself, 45 degrees, 225 degrees, and 315 degrees. And what does that mean? That means that they all have the same numbers for the points. They're all going to be radical 2 over 2 and radical 2 over 2. The only difference is in quadrant 2 over here, we have to go negative radical 2 over 2 for the cosine or the x-axis, and then go up positive 2 over 2. So they're the same numbers, but the sign of the cosine or the x-coordinate is negative. And down here in quadrant 3, we have to go negative cosine or negative x-coordinate and negative sine or negative y-coordinate. And over here in quadrant 3, we're going to go positive on the x, but then we have to go down, so it'll be negative. So you just memorize the numbers in quadrant 1 and then use your signs. If you're, this one is a cosine is negative and the sine is positive. And down here, the cosine is negative and the sine is negative. So that just tells you what the signs are. In quadrant 4, cosine is positive and the sine is negative. You want to know these, okay? And you can kind of close your eyes and see which way you go when you plot the points. Okay, so that helps us with our unit circle if we use the reference angles. Now let's talk about in radians. Let's do purple. So radians, this would be pi over 4, 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, and 7 pi over 4. All of those angles in radians have a reference angle of pi over 4. So the reference angles are these guys. Okay, so anytime you want the sine or the cosine of 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4, you know it's going to be radical 2 over 2, but you don't know whether it's positive or negative until you think about which quadrant it's in. Okay, so let's look at pi over 6 and pi over 3. So pi over 6 will be right here, and this is pi over 6, which is also 30 degrees. And then we're going to have this angle and this angle and this angle, since they're going to be the reference angles of right in here is going to be 30 degrees in every one of these, but we want the big angles that get us there. Okay, so the first one is going to be pi over 6 or 30 degrees. The second one is going to be this one, and that's going to be, this is 6 pi over 6. So it's going to be 1 up. So that's going to be 5 pi over 6. And it's also 30 degrees up from 180. So if you subtract 30 degrees, that would be 150 degrees. Okay, and then this one is going to be 7 pi over 6 because it's one more. And it's also going to be 180 plus 30 or 210 degrees. And this one is going to be 30 degrees less than 360. So that's going to be 330 degrees. And this is also, we're doing 6, so that's 12 pi over 6 here. So this would be 11 pi over 6. So the reference, the angles that have a reference angle of pi over 6 are 5 pi over 6, 7 pi over 6, and 11 pi over 6. And the reference angle, or the angles that have a reference angle of 30 degrees are 150 degrees, 210 degrees, and 330 degrees. Okay, and then let's go ahead and look at 60 degrees, which is pi over 3. So that's going to be up here. So 60 degrees or pi over 3. And then there's going to be this one, and this one, and this one. Okay, because these guys in here are all 60 degrees, 60 degrees, 60 degrees. Those are the reference angles. And what we want, they look like butterflies if you want to, butterflies or bow ties. So what we want is we want the angle that goes here, which is 60 degrees. Then we want this one, which is 60 degrees from 180 or 120 degrees. And this is also 3 pi over 3. So this will be 2 pi over 3. And then we want this one down here, which is going to be 4 pi over 3, and add 60 degrees to 180, which is 240. And then over here will be 5 pi over 3, and add 60 degrees, which would be 300. Okay, so these are the angles that have reference angles of either 60 degrees or pi over 3. Okay, so how does that help us fill in all the unit circles? Well, angles that share the same cosine sine as their reference angles, except for the sines. We can determine that from the quadrant. Let's go ahead and complete the sines and cosines on the unit circle. And actually, I'm going to stop this video here so we can get your unit circle ready, and we'll continue on the next video.